40 years ago, the Catalan illustrator Roser Capdevila created a series of children books called The Triplets, based on her own daughters. The story of the triplets was an immediate success. It's been translated to more than 40 languages. It's available in more than 150 countries. It became a TV show. So most likely, some of you already know them, or maybe your kids do. Being content for kids, repetition was important. So every single story and every single book follows the exact same pattern. And the pattern looks like this. The boring witch, which is a character on this universe, is bored, and so she goes and checks on the triplets. The triplets happen to be messing something up, so the boring witch casts the triplets away into a well-known universal story or novel. But the story, it's twisted, it's changed. Or the triplets, by appearing, they twist it, they mess it up, like more or less Back to the Future. Few moments later, few pages later, the boring witch jumps in to teach a lesson to the kids. The triplets sort everything out, and then the boring witch brings the triplets back, right? Easy peasy. What I just explained, it's also available in the Wikipedia, but it's written in a slightly different way, and I will read it out loud for you to see what happens. The Wikipedia says, the plots of the triplet sisters follow a definite pattern. Sometimes they play some prank or manage to annoy the bored witch, and to punish them, she sends them into a classic tale, legend, or children's or adults, such as Frankenstein or the Phantom of the Opera literary work. The main structure of the classic remains, but some twists, often hilarious anachronisms, such as showing the 40 thieves getting distracted from robbing a house by a camel race or TV, or Dr. Frankenstein as a veterinarian, are introduced to favor each plot and define the sisters' personalities. I ran out of breath, because I was speaking out loud, but if you had read it in your internal monologue, you would have run out of breath as well. What I would improve in this write-up is this. The plot of the triplet sisters follow a definite pattern, period. Sometimes, comma, they play some prank, Oxford, comma, or manage to annoy the bored witch, period. Remove. As a punishment, she sends them away into a classic tale, remove the parentheses, literary work, and all this pink part, I would put it elsewhere. Or, what's the same? I would have focused on the plot structure, explained examples in a follow-up paragraph, and kept the sentences smaller and simpler, shorter and simpler. Or what's the same, if you squint a little, I would have put production code in source main, test code in source test, and use smaller functions that I can compose, right? It's not coincidence that I used a list and I numbered the items. It's not bullets, it's numbers, because the order is important. If I switch the order of these, the stories will make no sense. And we know as developers that we must use order list when order matters and use an order list if the order doesn't matter. And we even have tags for that, right? And if you pay attention to how I'm writing this slide, you will see that I use imperative because I'm telling you to use order list and to use an order list, right? But what's more, I'm also telling you to always prefer the direct form over the passive form. I'm telling you to do this. I'm telling you that this happened because someone did this, right? Okay, sometimes you have to use the passive form because, okay, no one is responsible for the story to be twisted. There is no subject on this sentence, right? What just happened? For the past 4 minutes, I've been talking about stuff, delivering content without any meaning, start and end, an introduction or nothing, right? I broke another rule of documentation, which is follow a very strict pattern of 5 sections. State your audience, manage expectations, deliver the content, then finally review expectations and close with some follow-up contents or some more ideas for the audience to continue. Because this is a presentation, I will introduce one extra step, which is present myself, introduce myself. But there is a problem now. I already started, so what we'll do, we will pretend that nothing happened, go back in time, and start over. Hello, good afternoon. This is the first session after lunch. It's a tough slot. I'll try to do my best. The session is called The Emperor Has No Dogs. My name is Ignasi Marimon-Clos. I'm from Barcelona. This is GeeCON Krakow. I think that's correct now. And there will be a session, there will be a round of questions at the end. We'll use Slido, hashtag GeeCON, you know the thing. So who am I? I'm a level 23 developer, right? And the elders here will know what I mean by that. I sometimes introduce myself as breaker of CI builds, software detective. I'm a major troll. What is also important is who am I not? I'm not a graphics designer, so don't expect anything flashy, don't expect anything that makes too much sense graphically. This session is very long. I have like 200 slides, so here we go. Don't blink or you'll miss it. Target audience for today are senior developers, junior developers, remote developers, program managers, product managers, engineering managers, mob programmers, etc., etc. So it's a very wide audience. About the expectations, what you should expect. You should expect what I told you to expect on the abstract that you can already read on the website. And this is the abstract, and the type font is super, super small. So I will summarize the important part, which is this part here, into 5 parts. First, I will share my journey from no documenting to documenting, some tips and tricks to make documenting more swallowable. Then, share some habits I developed to make it easier to not forget. Then, situations in which documenting can save money. And finally, share some arguments to fight these people who don't want to document. So, let's go. I told you I'm a level 23 developer now, but I was not always like that. Long time ago, I was just a squire living on a country house outside of the city walls, and every single morning I will pace from my house there to the castle up there, because I was manning the horses there, right? Or maybe, if you were with me, I was a developer who read specs, did some code, then wrote some tests and document, except that's not true. And you probably find this as a personal attack. It's not, it's just about me. That's what it really was, right? I would skim the specs, write some code, deploy, find out that I messed up, read the specs again. Oh, hold on, I would code it again. Of course, there were no tests and there was no documentation. And that happened day in, day out, day in, day out, over and over and over and over, and I felt trapped. And like in the movie, The Groundhog Day, go look it up, best movie ever, I said, okay, I have to better myself. And so that's what I did. And I started learning and finding out where I could improve to make less errors. And so that's where I ended up. I would read the specs, I would ask for clarification. Then I would go and collaborate with the QA, some developer, maybe the product manager, et cetera, and write some tests, and then do the code. But I was still not documenting. Like in the movie, I was stuck. I was not getting the girl. There was something missing. And I felt like I was trapped every day walking from my country house into manning the horses up in the castle in a downward spiral, right? But one day, on my morning walk, something was different. Down the tree, I found 3 girls. They were reviewing a PR or something, and as I walked by, they said, hey, Ignasi, we're here for you. What do you mean you're here for me? Yeah, we heard about your story, we're here to help you. Okay, we'll learn that you are on this downward spiral, so I think that what you need, what spelunking is called as a kick. When you are on a whirl in spelunking, someone kicks you out of it, otherwise you'll be trapped there forever. So here's what you could do. You can start investing on these personal kicks, and these personal kicks will help you document. So first thing you have to do, like what you did when you started coding or testing, is learn, and do one thing and do it purposely. For example, I was lucky, I joined a company doing open source, and I joined it at the time where we were about to do a release, and we were doing documentation day and night for several weeks. And that was super useful because it kept my mind completely focused and away from other distractions. I wanted to go, no, it's time for documenting, so that's what we did, right? So that's one thing, practice, do one thing very deliberately. Another thing is learn ways to document. you can use different tools and you can find different ways to realize if your document is correct or not. For example, the C4 model for architecture, the 4 C's of effective documentation, or the axis. And I will go into these 3. There's plenty more tools and frameworks. I will present just these 3, right? So for example, the C4 model, that's the most well-known. It's a way to document your architecture, and it works in 4 layers, from very generic to very specific. And they are context, container, component, and code. I will not go into much detail, but it's more or less like this. So for example, if I tell you about my current employer, I worked at an OTA with 4 BUs, or what's the same, because you're not on the business most likely, I work at an online travel agency with 4 business units. That's very generic. That describes the whole black box of the thing. But if I jump in, I can tell you at the container level that we have bookings, recommendations, currency exchange. And if I focus on bookings, I can tell you that the booking requires the steps X, Y, Z, and it requires per system and sending emails, et cetera, et cetera. And if I dug even deeper, I can go into in the gory details of the code, right? Go look it up, C4 model, super useful, very visual. Next thing, the 4 C's of effective coding, of effective documentation. Good documentation has to be clear, concise, correct, and complete. And if you stop a second and think about it, it's the exact same thing that we need from our code, right? I will not go into details, but I want to plant this idea and go back to the things that I'm presenting, because the axis. The axis is a framework that some company did, and then they moved and changed the name, blah, blah, blah. And it suggests you break your documentation into 4 categories. And I will present them very briefly. Tutorials. Tutorials is a type of document that takes a user who has absolutely no idea of the thing that you're talking about, and you take that user from nowhere to somewhere. And the user didn't really understand all the steps, but you help them set up, you help them have something going. For example, first steps with Spring Boot, right? Then we have how-to guides. How-to guides are increments. In increments, you take that user, assuming that they know X, Y, Z, and you help them do something else. Deploy your Spring Boot. So you assume that they have the Spring Boot, or add persistent layer to your Spring Boot, or deploy your persistent Spring Boot, right? There's increments that you can compose. Explanation, this is the most common type of documentation. It's the kind of thing that you Google and find very quickly, with all the details about the session in Hibernate, or about how this other library works and whatnot. They describe all the features. It's high level, it's more gray boxy, right? Finally, reference is the one that's closer to the code. It's Java docs, it's comments, it's detailing the exact behavior of a method of a class. It doesn't tell you how to put this class together with another class. That's responsibility of another type of document, right? So I presented a few things, and there's a bonus. If you only do one thing, do this. This is the technical writing course by Google. It says that it's like 3 or 4 hours, just the first 2 parts. The other 2 are optional. This is super, super nice. And I'll spoil it for you, because all the slides in blue that I was sharing earlier are a summary of this technical writing course by Google. For example, when I said that you should use order list, or use an order list depending on the type of the ordering, or that you should use this structure, all these are the kind of things that you will learn on the tech writing course by Google. So at this point, when I had learned all this, when I had worked on my kicks, I was no longer a squire, and I got promoted. And now I was a guard on the castle. I no longer had to pace every day from the country house into the castle. I could live in the castle already. So that's when I started working on my next phase. I had learned all this, but I still did find something was missing. So sure enough, I went for some help. And who did I talk to? Of course, the triplets. They were there. They were there for me. So I just went, and they said, OK, Ignasi, you have to understand who is it that you are fighting. If you don't know your enemy, you will know how to win, right? And your biggest enemy is the blank page syndrome. Every time you have a blank page and you have to start coding, what do you do? Every time you have a blank page and you have to write a test, what do you do? Well, it's the same problem with documentation, right? So for example, they said, just write something, and then eventually increment, improve in smaller pieces, but make sure that you're never facing a blank page anymore. An improvement is cheaper than a creation. It's something that you can do very early in the morning while you're still sipping your coffee. But I'll go into more of this later. Or another thing that you could do, and here's another trick, which is in your Jira board, create explicit tasks for documenting. It's an anti-pattern, the same way that we don't create a task for testing a feature. You should not do this, but until you internalize it as part of completing a feature, do it explicit so you never forget. Okay? What's more, even if you put that there, after you put it there, sorry, make sure you do that first. Document first so you're absolutely certain that you will not forget. Another thing that you could do is you can deliberately practice. Every morning while having my coffee, I will put 10 minutes on the side to document what I'm about to do today. I will put some time on the side to review what I did yesterday and make sure that it's documented. Or I will just put 30 minutes every week on the side to purposely document something that I know, even though I know that it's documentation that I will throw away. It's deliberate practice. It's similar to when we were learning TDD. And that's no coincidence that I keep mentioning when I learned TDD, when I learned coding, because documentation is not more than tests that I will never need to compile. It's a parallelism that I want to explore a bit. And that's where I'm going. For example, I said that good documentation, effective documentation, is complete, concise, and correct, and whatnot, the 4 Cs, blah, blah, blah. And I already hinted that it's like the same properties in the code. And there's different levels and the 4 Cs. And I'm telling you to do them first, like tests, right? But there's also another thing. There's also advantage of doing documentation first, which is you will prevent the expert paradox, and you will develop a ubiquitous language. What do I mean by that? The expert paradox is a situation in which you know so much about the thing you need to explain that you lose the capability to explain that thing. And it's super painful to watch. Every single time, at the end of a sprint, there's a sprint demo, and the person presenting, 10 seconds in, and you have no clue what their person is talking about. They know too much, and so they lose the capability to explain. And the ubiquitous language is because the moment you start writing and there is no implementation, there's no nothing, you realize that you need to think of, okay, what's the name for this? What's the name for that? What's this entity? Is this person or is this user? Because it's two different things, right? So you develop and you ask for clarification, and once you have all the names, you only need to work on the code. And that's good because then you separate your mental state from doing one thing, create names, and doing the other thing, which is create code. It's completely separate. For example, do them first. A few weeks ago, I was developing this feature. This feature, well, it's Scala code, whatever, and I was pair programming with a colleague, and we said, okay, we need to implement this, and we know what we want, but there's so much cases I'm not entirely sure. And I said, okay, let's stop for a second. Let's keep the signature of the method, not implement anything. Let's document it first, and that's what we did. And here's the Scala doc, and that's exactly the behavior that we wanted. And it was like this, and it was like that, and it has the params, and it behaves like this, and whatnot, and blah, blah, blah. Perfect. And the moment we had this, we said, hold on. There's 5 behaviors, so there's 5 tests. Perfect. So with the documentation, we did the test, and once we had those 2 things done, we only had to implement the code, or even better, tap, 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 and let GitHub Copilot do that for us, right? But let's push forward this parallelism that documentation and tests are more or less the same. In documentation, we talk about, in tests, we talk about test coverage, and we know that 0% is bad, and 100% is also bad. Well, in documentation, we can say that documents are like salt. Definitely none, definitely not too much. Right? You have to find the balance. You have to find the facts, not coupled with the implementation, not spend too much money on documentation, right? We know from the Agile Manifesto that we want working software over extensive documentation. But the Agile Manifesto doesn't say working software over no documentation, right? There has to be some. So you have to find this balance. But if we look at the problem of this parallelism from the point of view of the roles, in a team, there's a QA engineer sometimes, but that doesn't mean if there's a QA on my team that I should not be writing tests. I should still be writing tests, right? I should not push the responsibility to that person. And same thing goes with tech writers. I still need to write documentation, but the tech writer will unify and correct if need be. Again, more parallelisms outside in. I have end-to-end tests, integration tests, like I have the context, container, and component on the C4 model, and unit test, which is the code. And in any case, another advantage of doing documentation first, and doing the tests first, and doing this design first, is that in any case, I have to be mindful of the user. And that's very interesting, because I learned that when I was doing tests first, because I didn't know the implementation, I had to type the name of the class, I had to type the name of the method that I wanted to invoke, I had to think of the arguments that the client will have. So that put me on the client side, that put me on the shoes of the user. So that I realized that when I was doing tests first, my APIs look nicer. And with documentation happens the same thing, right? But in documentation, there's another problem, which is there's 5 levels of communication, which are a real-life conversation. So I'm talking to you, and I see your verbal cues, and see your non-verbal cues, and so I can adapt my speech, and I can go back, and I can rephrase. But then I can just be a call on the phone, and I lose these verbal cues, and it could be messaging, and there is no immediate feedback, or it could be email, or maybe a group email, so I no longer know when you will read it or when you'll respond. Or even worse, it can be a document which I write today, and I don't know who or when will read that. Right? So I'm going from now, here, you and me, through anytime, anywhere, anyone. Because documentation, you write once, and can be read anytime, anywhere. So going back, when you're mindful of the user, you're showing empathy. And to do that, you have to develop this empathy. And to do that, you have to start practicing as soon as you can. And a way to do that is to document every single step on your journey. So as soon as you prepare a pull request, describe it, put notes so that the pull request reviewer has an easier task. And if you are explicit about, hey, I'm being over verbose with this documentation because I want feedback on how I document, you will get this immediate feedback and you will improve on how you document, right? So, summary of the tricks. Do them first to prevent the expert paradox, develop an ubiquitous language, add visuals to help yourself. That's very useful if you create the C4 diagrams, because they are there already in the pull request. You can just copy-paste them. You can just link to the documentation if it already exists, and you save time. And you are testing the documentation because you realize that the implementation and the documentation diverged, and so you can go into documentation and do just 1 or 2 tweaks and keep going, right? Doing the documentation first helps you detect unknown unknowns earlier. So once you've done the documentation, once you've done the tests, once you've clarified everything, 90% of the task is done, and you only need to write the code. Like I said, tap, 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 let the GitHub and the AIs do the thing. And usually when I reach this point, I get some people raise their hands and they say, Ignasi, but you're talking about waterfall, specification first and the documentation first and so on. And I said, no. Documentation specs are 2 different things. I'll refer back to the Ataxis framework. I will just move on. So at this point, I got a raise again. I was no longer a guard, and they told me, okay, you're now an archer, and you're promoted. You no longer live on the catacombs. You can go up on one of the rooms with a window and so on. That was great. I felt really empowered, but I still felt like, okay, sometimes I forget to write the docs. I need this extra something. I don't know what that is. And sure enough, I know that now I need to build these habits, but I didn't know it then, so I went again for some help. And that's what the triplets said. And they said, okay, habits. The simplest way is build triggers. When the bell rings, you go food. When the PR is building, you document. When you see an acronym, you expand it, right? Triggers, triggers, triggers. Find the triggers that work for you. Detect early on when something is going wrong and fix it as soon as you can. For example, when coding, I shouldn't be selecting names. Names should be selected already. So when coding, don't spend time selecting names. Just call your things foo, name this later, I don't know what this is, open parents, close parents, whatever. And then in the PR, create the PR as a draft and put some time aside and then review the names later, for example. When waiting for the build, document. When every morning as I arrive, before I do anything, 1 sentence on the documentation. Describe the PR, put a link on the documentation. Oh, there's no documentation to link. Okay, that's a reminder that I have to do. So tomorrow morning, that's what I will do. I will create the page, even if it's empty. When commenting on a PR, prefer a suggestion over a comment, because if the PR you're reviewing contains documentation and there's problems, don't be the extra friction. For example, in the image above, there is a typo. In the image above, there's a comment that says, hey, there's a typo on this word. What's better is a suggestion, which is the fix. So the pull request submitter can just click this button and move on. But it has a problem. It will trigger all the jobs again, all the build and the test and whatnot. Forget about that. Except that Titibulus, the servant of Satan, in charge of adding typos, will squeeze into your documentation. And that's fine. Don't spend a single extra second that's necessary, right? Just deal with it. Adopt the improv rule. Just say yes and. If it's a very, very dramatic typo on the first sentence of the first document, the first thing that the user reads, then yeah, be the friction. Otherwise, fix it tomorrow. Open a separate PR. Don't be the one that puts a stopper on someone else's work, right? More triggers. On a blank page, I told you we would come back to this. Focus on why. Blank page, why? Blank page, why? Do this, why? Document this, why am I doing this? Why are we doing this feature? Why, right? Or think of the elevator pitch. If you have 5 seconds on an elevator, explain what this feature does. Okay, commit, push. If you have 5 minutes on a taxi ride, extend on a second paragraph. So first paragraph, elevator pitch, second paragraph, taxi ride, rest, the full story, right? Even better, if you are on a blank page, get your IDE and let GitHub Copilot start suggesting things. Next. Okay, this doesn't make sense. I change this, and before you know it, you only type half the sentence, but the full paragraph makes perfect sense, right? In my case, what I do is I have separate IDEs. VS Code for documenting, IntelliJ for coding. And I keep going back and forth, and they are over the same code, and I don't mind. And I keep going back and forth, different setup, and everything just works. Again, documenting is a show of empathy, so don't use terms you didn't introduce earlier because it will produce cognitive load. It will tell the person, oh, I don't know what is going on, right? Or another thing that you could do to practice is on a PR, create the PR, push the code, describe, create as draft, comment as if you were a reviewer, and just then send the PR and put it ready for review. When you're not a PR, someone pushes documents, reinforce them, say thank you for adding this, right? Don't stay quiet, just reinforce this power, build this writing culture on your team. So, finally, again, build your list of triggers. No acronyms. Every time you see an acronym, expand it. Do not press enter without reading first. And what this means is write, read, reduce, repeat, reduce, repeat, reduce, repeat. When you cannot reduce anymore, press enter. And by reduce, I mean use shorter sentences, don't use adverbs, prefer data. If you don't have data, don't put the adverb at all. And make sure that you're not coupling your document to the implementation. And keep on reducing and keep on simplifying until you cannot simplify it more. Use shorter sentences, but not in a way that your context will be completely dull. I'll leave this here. It's super long. It's super interesting. This book is amazing. It's super short, but it's super, super useful. So what happened when I had learned all this and I had all these triggers up my sleeve, I met this guy. This wizard came to me and he said, Ignasi, you are not worthy of the box. And I said, the what? Yeah, the box. But what is that, Mr. Wizard? Oh, I cannot tell you. But do you have instructions or documents on how to use that? No. And I have to go with smoke screen, and he was gone. And so I was just there, left with a wooden box, not knowing what to do. And as I was going back to my room, I realized that I could no longer, the key didn't fit, and someone came to me, patted my shoulder, and said, Ignasi, come with me. You are now enrolled on the Knights University. And I'm like, the what? Yeah, you're on the right track. You come with me, you'll start practicing and swords and horses and whatnot. And fair enough, what happened at the Knights University, we had some mentors, and these mentors were the higher-ups. You call them stakeholders or maybe VPs and whatnot. So I had access to other people. I had to adapt my speech. And that's what I did. I had to find ways to convince them to give us time, engineers, to put some documentation. Why? Because we can save money. This is a radio bullet. Onboarding. Content in the onboarding is super, super, super useful. It will get people up to speed faster. Onboarding. links to doing training on how to document, on learning C4, 4C, Google Tech Writing. So embed into the new engineers the concept that this is a writing culture company. Even better, first task for an engineer as you onboard them is document. Why? Because they'll have to scroll over the existing documentation. They will understand the product back and forth. They will know the structure of this documentation, and they will learn the structure of the code later. That's fine. But they will familiarize and they will understand that we are a documentation first company because documentation is important because it saves money. This is another rally bullet. Document absolutely everything that's homegrown. If I cannot Google it, it has to be documented. Otherwise, you're wasting money. You're just burning bills by the dozens, right? For example, SOPs or deployment process, sorry, not SOPs, standard operating procedures, right? There's a counter rule for the acronyms. If it's available in the Urban Dictionary, you can use it. For example, self-serve for the win, right? You can Google it, it's allowed, at least on my book. Here's another ready bullet. Another way to save money is by making sure that anything you write will be available and discoverable. Discoverable and announcing, we've done this feature, the documentation is here, we've done that feature, the documentation is there, right? So for example, one way for people to find what you did is to follow a convention. All docs of this type will live here, all docs of that type will live there, docs for this audience will live in the wiki, docs for that audience will be on the README, right? Another way is to make things very, very easy to find. For example, in my company, we use Confluence, which is a wiki on steroids, and it has a very nice feature, which is when you search, you can search by emojis. So when you search, I put the emoji books, and suddenly I see all the documents. And all the documents that I write are always books, how-to, because it's a how-to material, books, manual, because it's a manual, books, reference, because it's a reference, right? So it's very easy to find what you're looking for. Oh, I know someone wrote a how-to on creating a Terraform resource for whatever pops up, books how-to, and then suddenly I go straight into what I'm looking for. Or even better than making things discoverable, put links all over the place so that you, even if you don't know, you know that clicking here, you go into a direct place. This is a data dashboard, and at the top left, first thing, quick links to important documentation, because suddenly when someone is looking at this, most likely they're on an incident, and if they're on an incident, there's no time for them to think, okay, maybe this is related to whatever service, that the repository name is whatever, no. Click, 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 I'm there. And even better than links, is copy-paste the documentation. If your documentation is factual, you don't even need to know elsewhere. If the documentation is factual, it will not change. And if it changes, you have bigger problems than copy-pasting the documentation. So in my book, it's perfectly fine to repeat yourself and write every time. This is another Datadog dashboard, and it had some concepts, so we just copy-pasted the explanation of those concepts and the expectations of the percentages and whatnot. So you're here, you have the information that you need in place, beautiful. So conventions good, discoverability is best, links beat them all, and in place is the super winner. Final ready bullet. Disclaimer, for this one, I don't have metrics, but I have no doubts. Here we go. Efficient communication is required for asynchronous communication, which is required for remote work. A documenting culture leads to better writing skills, which leads to efficient communication. So, if you don't want to go back to the office, you'd better start promoting a documenting culture and a writing culture. Okay. At this point, higher-ups were convinced. I had green light to start squeezing some time, some capacity on every sprint to document. But, okay, something happened. One morning, I come out on the castle, and there's this mob, pitchforks and flames and everything coming my way. And I think it's, oh my God, it's the other engineers. I poke the bear, they don't want to document, they are coming for me, they are coming for my guts. And to my surprise, as they are about to kill me, they stop not 2 meters from me. And they say, Ignasi, we need your help. And are you sure it's the right Ignasi? Yeah. We need your help. And what's going on? Well, see for yourself. there's a dragon attacking the village. You are the latest night out of university. We don't have any more students, so it's up to you. Go see the princess. She'll help you. So fair enough, I go see the princess regent, aka the PR, and she tells Ignasi, I hereby name you latest night of the thingies. I don't know the title, I was not paying attention. Now, go fight the dragon for us. Meanwhile, the dragon is breaking havoc. It smells like chicken, so not very pleasant. And so, well, what I had to do is simple. I hop on a horse, get out of the city walls. I hop off the horse. I put my pants. I take off my sword, and I face the dragon, right? It was the sunset. It was quiet, small breeze, not a soul on sight. And the dragon attacked first. And the dragon said, oh, but documentation is hard to maintain. To which I stopped his attack and replied, yeah, but undocumented code is harder to maintain. And he quickly attacked again. He jumped over me and said, yeah, but I don't know what to explain or in how much detail. That's fine, just focus on the why. Some docs is better than no docs. Documenting as you code, and you put yourself on the user's shoes. But he kept on pushing forward, and he said, this code is very stable. No one will edit it. Yeah, but even if it's very stable, it will overleaf you. Some new users will come out. Some new data scientists will start consuming the data it produces. Someone needs to still consume it and deal with it, right? Yeah, but I don't know where to store this documentation. It's fine. It's like code. Just start writing, and eventually we'll figure it out. We'll refactor, we'll shuffle, we'll move things back and forth. It's fine. Yeah, but it takes time. Well, yeah, about that. I have a full slide deck, 200 slides. I can help you with this one, so don't worry, just come with me later. No. I already answered this on Slack, just search there. Yeah, but in the time that this fight took us, I copied your answers from Slack and I put it on the wiki where it's more discoverable, books, manual, colon, and now it's available for anyone. Anyone know that it's there? Perfect. Yeah, but I'm the team lead. Ask me anything. Okay, I have a question for you. Have you ever heard about the boost factor? Perfect. He was very pissed. He put on the caps lock and started shouting, my code is the documentation, my code and the types and everything. Yes, that's the source of truth. And I replied, all right. Have you ever heard about string split or big decimal scale? Anyone used string split before? Show hands, some hands. Come on, everyone has. Let's talk about string split. Let's imagine I have this string at the top, column foo, column blah, 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 blah. What will happen when I use split with a colon? It will split by the colon. What will happen if I use split by the colon with a number 5 or a number 8 or a separator O, etc., etc.? What happens is that there's some edge cases. For example, if you run out of separators, you can still get the separator on the output. I never expected that. And if I had not read the documentation, I wouldn't know. But let's talk about big decimal. In big decimal, what you represent is arbitrarily big decimal numbers, floating point numbers. And you have a constructor, which is a factoring method called value of. And the value of, you type the bases along, and then you type the scale. And the scale is this number here in the arrow, right? So my question for you is, the case above, val result 0, blah, blah, blah. Which one of those two is this? We're all engineers. We know how to express information with a times 10 to the power of whatever, right? You would be surprised to know that the one above is actually the one with 2 decimals. So there's some issue. There was some bug when they created this API very long time ago. I know maybe Java 1.0 or even before that, and they reversed. And this is super confusing. And if it weren't for the documentation, we wouldn't know. So at this point, the dragon was completely speechless. He opened his jaw. He didn't know what to do. I thought he was about to spit fire, and I said, okay, that's my chance. I started running to him. I opened my bag. I put out the wooden box. I shoved it down his throat. I closed his mouth, jumped for my life, and fair enough, it exploded. Pieces of chicken flying all over the place, and that was it. I had won. And now, I was no longer required as a knight. I had protected the village, so I was free to roam as a level 23 developer. So that is it. That's all the framework there is. That's all the steps that you need to learn. So now it's time to review the expectations, like I promised. So what I did promise is that there would be a journey, tips and tricks, blah, blah, but I lied. I didn't fulfill my promise and I didn't fulfill my recommendations. I didn't follow my recommendations because it's not a numbered list. It's a numbered list because the order matters. And the order matters because you have to first evolve yourself, then detect what works for you, then build these habits, convince the stakeholders, and just then, and not before that, rally the troops. Or to make it even stickier, kicks, tricks, triggers, monies, and troops. Right? That's just a silly slide. Don't pay too much attention to this one. And finally, close with some links and follow-ups. How to go from Squire to level 23 developer. Easy peasy. Do the Google Tech Writing course. I cannot stress that enough. With that, I can only say that here's all the images from OpenAI DALL-E 2. It's no longer available. It's my favorite generative image thingy, super hallucinative, super fun. More ideas I got from that than from myself for this talk. All the fights with the dragon are ideas I got from this super useful Slack channel, Barcelona Engineering. 11,000 engineers, super nice. The triplets work, it's of course work of Roger Capdeville and Mercè Company. And that's it, except, again, I lied. I managed expectations and I didn't fulfill my promise. I told you in the title, you can see it everywhere, printed all over the conference, that this talk was about the emperor not having dogs. And I didn't talk about the emperor at all, did I? No. Oh, I like the crowd work. So here we go. The board witch was bored, and so she went and checked on the triplets, and the triplets were making a mess, like playing or something like that. So she said, okay, kids, that's not what you should be doing, so you come with me. And she casted them away into this bifurcation in the middle of the forest where they met this tailor. And the tailor said, kids, do you know where the emperor castle is? And they said, yeah, it's this way, but that's not true. The castle was the other way, and that's what they did. They went the other way, and they impersonated the tailor. Funny enough, at that point, the emperor was taking his afternoon stroll. So they went and ordered some cloth and ordered some things, and then started making measurements and doing some designs and whatnot, and yada, yada. And the morning after, for the big reveal, all the village gathered together, and at 11 o'clock sharp, the bell started ringing, and the emperor came out dressed like a superhero. The board witch was there, knowing what the superhero was, started mocking him. Ha, 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 that's not the emperor dress. And he felt like this was mockery. And he said, guards, take that woman. And of course, she, being a witch, jumped on her broom and started flying away for her life, not knowing that the emperor was indeed a superhero. Because, ladies and gentlemen, the emperor is a superhero. But, now look at me, I'm here. In case you didn't know, and here's the morale of the talk, this talk is not about documenting, this talk is about becoming a prompt engineer. Now, thank you very much. Do we have any questions? Let me check that. Okay. These are not my questions. This is some other session, I think. I can try, but I'll make a fool of myself. Come on, refresh. Oh, come on. Okay, never mind. So, because we have a few minutes, if I get my cursor back, I have to admit that I lied again. I said I covered this part, and then I said I covered that part, right? But did I cover the part in the middle? Did I cover this part here? It says software like board games needs instructions, blah, blah, blah. You should draw a card or play it, right? Did I cover that? I did not. And I like to keep up my promises. So let's talk about Uno. And we'll talk about Uno following the actual documentation which is available on the Mattel website. So here's my question for you, guys. What does that one on the bottom right corner +4 do? Anyone? I'm not even talking about stacking or anything like that. No, no, no. There, you cannot stack +2, you cannot stack +4. What does +4 do? Come again? Draw 4 cards, that's correct. But when can you use that card? Anyone? No? Okay, I see that no one here plays Uno, right? No one. Okay. +4, you can only use if you cannot use anything else, so that's the last resort. And it works like this. If I put a +4, the next player may pick 4, because the next player can challenge me. I may be lying. I may be able to still use some other card. And if they challenge me and I played correctly, they take 8. And if they challenge me and I was cheating, I take 8. Anyone here knew that? No, because no one reads the documentation. Right? What's even worse is that it's a very similar API to the +2, and it's a completely different thing. Right? But let me ask a different question. Who wins at Uno? Who's the winner at Uno? Come on, no one played Uno? There's a hand there? Hold on. When you play your last card, any other answer? No? Okay. When you play your last card, you don't win at Uno. You win a round. And what happens is that when you win a round, all the cards still on someone's hands are added up, and that's points for you. And you keep playing rounds until a player gets to 500. And this is so important that it's on the second sentence of the manual right there. Objective of the game, blah, 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 period. Points in rounds accumulate, and the first player to reach 500 points wins. That's how important this is. But this is so important that it's even there on winning the game in the section. And this is just one A4 page. And it says, the winner is the first player to reach 500 points. Yes. Pyramid. I skipped that. Never mind. That's it. Thank you very much. Oh, question.
Why should we document things if nobody reads them?
The AI will read them. People will read them. You'll be surprised. When there's enough weight in terms of how much documentation is available, it will happen. What you should do is never answer a question on Slack. Hey, how do I do that? Hold on. Go document it. Yeah, I documented it there for you. Why? Because there, it's a place where everyone can edit, everyone can improve, everyone can maintain. Your comment on Slack will soon go obsolete and only you can edit. Another question? Yes?
Just a remark about this. Even if nobody reads the documentation, just the fact of writing the documentation, at least for me, that's my experience, helps me improve the design of my code. When it's hard to explain in the documentation, usually it means that my code isn't actually very friendly to use, not clear, etc. So it helps me, even if nobody reads it.
I'll repeat for the recording. Even if no one will read it, just the effort of writing it will make you realize how good or bad your code could be. If you don't know how to write it, you probably are feeling the pain of the users. They will not know how to use it. So that's very often a sign that your code is not correct, the API is confusing, the API is inconsistent. Yes, another question?
Not everyone is really good at communicating in writing or even communicating. You have a team of different people with different levels of ability in documentation.
Yes.
They want to, but they're not very good at this. How would you deal with that? Like, what can we do?
Okay, so the question is, not everyone is good at communicating, not everyone is good at writing. You have a team with very diverse backgrounds and abilities. How do I deal with that? It's as simple as this. Replace documenting with testing, with coding. How do you deal with that? How do you deal with a team where not everyone is equally as good at coding? You do some mentorship, you do some practice, you help that person, you do some training, you hire some external consultant that will help you bootstrap everything, right? It's the exact same concept, and I hit it on a corner on a white balloon here that I put on the very last second while preparing this, because I believe that 10 years from now, we will not be writing code. And there's been plenty of talks on this conference about AI becoming prompt engineers, knowing what to and how to tell the machine what is it that you want, right? And when you know how to do that, when you know how to communicate, when you know how to express, that's when the machine will do what we want. But even if we don't look so far-fetched, so far ahead, if you want to be a remote worker, be very good at communicating. I had a friend who's interviewing a company, and all the interviews are written chats over Slack. And the idea from that company is, that's how we deal on 90% of the time within the team. So we want to know how that interaction with you would be. Any other question? One more question.
Yeah, do you have some thoughts on executable documentation, like, for example, on the Apache documentation, all the snippets of code that are part of the documentation are actually fetched from unit tests, etc., from code that is actually exercised in terms of tests, so that the code is always in sync with the documentation and we're sure that it's valid code, basically.
The question is, do I have some thoughts on ways to embed code into documentation so that the code is fetched from actual code, so that the code in the documentation, the snippet in the documentation is always in sync and compiles? Yes, I purposely kept every tooling, every detailed technical out of the talk, but it is imperative, in my opinion, that any snippet that you put is not copy-paste, is that a piece of code that you're tooling rendering HTML, the documentation, or PDF, or whatever output, goes, fetches, and puts in here. Rodi supports that, AsciiDoc supports that. I used to work for a company, we used something called Paradox. We extracted things, and what you usually do is you go and write some test, and part of the test, which is user code attacking your API, will be tagged with a comment, and the tool finds this comment, extracts, and embeds. And you know, as a user, when reading this, okay, I can find this snippet in the actual code in the GitHub repository, right? And what we did when we were using Paradox, we made an improvement so that when you see a snippet, you click a button, that button opens GitHub and shows you exactly that piece of code in a main class, in a test class. Right? Okay, I think we're good. Thank you very much.